Welcome to Stand Up for Doctors. I'm your host, Kim Downey. Thank you very much for joining us. This channel is dedicated to amplifying the voices of doctors, other healthcare professionals, and patients as they share their unique struggles, triumphs, and passions. My mission is to build connection and create advocacy for healthy doctors, driving positive change that benefits both doctors and patients. This is a space for everyone who cares about the future of healthcare. If you appreciate this content, please like and subscribe now. It really helps the episodes reach our target audience. And I'm also pleased to announce that we're hosting an amazing physician retreat October 9th to 12th, 2026. It will be a weekend to connect, empower, recharge, and celebrate. CMEs will be available. Please reach out for more information. If you're a doctor interested in attending, or if anyone like to sponsor our retreat, we can create sponsorship to fit your budget. And today I'm so happy to welcome Dr. Lillian Emlet. Thanks for joining us today, Lillian.
Thanks so much for having me, Kim. It really is an honor.
Yeah, and I'm so happy because I know that you've also interviewed me, and that was quite an honor. And I believe that one will air before this one, so I'm happy to reciprocate. And by way of a brief introduction, Dr. Lillian Emlet is a critical care physician, founder of Transforming Healthcare Coaching, and an executive coach for physician leaders. And today we'll be talking about Lillian's work as a physician coach, and we're both ambassadors for the Dr. Lorna Breen Heroes Foundation, and we're working very hard to support healthcare workers to create a positive impact. And I know your work focuses on coaching for individuals, teams, and systems. And as we know, many doctors and other healthcare workers are understandably and rightfully struggling in the healthcare system today. And there are some who are thriving. So I'm trying to spotlight all of the things, right? Like healthcare leaders who are doing it right, and in a damaged system, what individuals can still do to shore themselves up, and what we can learn from doctors and healthcare workers such as yourself who are still finding ways to thrive because we need doctors. So thank you for everything that you're doing. And I always ask my guests, what would you like our audience to most know about you?
So I would say probably to most know about me is the fact that I am super curious and love learning. And so all of my mentees, friends, and colleagues will tell you that I'm pretty energetic. And so uh, that would probably be the biggest thing is that there's really nothing that isn't interesting and cool for me to find out. And I think that really informs my coaching practice. Because that really underpins how we work with people, their teams, and the organizations that they serve.
I love that. And having a curiosity is just so important. And that's how we move forward with things is like asking questions and remaining genuinely curious. So, yeah, thank you for sharing that. And I like our guests to start out by sharing a powerful story. What is your why?
So for me, my why is to really help all of my friends and colleagues in healthcare, and that means all professions. So that means nurses, nurse practitioners, physician assistants, pharmacists. My dad was a pharmacist. It really takes an entire interprofessional team to be able to deliver care. And unlike the fact that most businesses and most narratives for coaching has been reserved for the executive level and the C-suites and the department chairs, I really want to democratize the availability of coaching for everyone in healthcare. I mean, because I don't know how many times we have seen and watched since the pandemic where if it's the nurses that become sick or not well in the department, it really affects the physician. And so we all are interactive and interdependent upon each other. And so really our coaching and the reason why Transforming Healthcare Coaching was formed was to really go beyond the walls of a single organization, a single group, a single team, and to be able to begin to change that we have a place for all of us and that we are more similar than we are dissimilar, no matter what profession, no matter what role, no matter what seniority, no matter what generation. And so that's really sort of my why for transforming healthcare coaching.
And I love that, and that we're talking to everyone because healthcare leaders have a responsibility, right, to care for their teams. And so they need to acknowledge that they've experienced trauma, a lot of them, and to address that for themselves or any issues that perhaps they need to address with coaching so they can show up with their best selves for their teams. And then the team members have an individual responsibility to acknowledge that oftentimes the leaders are doing the best they can, but they have constraints as well. So if we give each other grace and show each other love, and that might sound, like a little hokey, but in some ways, if everyone was just kind to each other, I feel like in some ways things could be better today. And I fully understand why doctors and other healthcare workers are struggling. Can you share some specific examples in each way? How you coach individuals, how you coach teams, and how you coach systems?
Yeah, so I would say the most common thing that people come to us for is individual coaching because I think there is a lot of desire for privacy for physicians, especially, but also anyone once they come into leadership positions really begin to become a little more anxious about how they're perceived. And really, as the higher up you go, you have less and less people who have shared that same peer experience. So it's normal to do individual coaching. But after 3 to 6 months with individual coaching, you realize that everything sort of gets repaired through that relationship of coaching. That when we think about the wheel of life, even though we may be talking about physiology or mental health or the foundations of your own personal well-being, that then trickles and leads into seeing possibility, having capacity to be able to deal with all kinds of work-related emergencies, seeing more, like you said, grace and ability to see in your team how things could be different or improved. Creativity, finding new solutions and innovation when you yourself as the leader is transformed. And so usually after about 6 months to a year, at some point, the natural evolution of the conversation is, I really want to bring this to my group. I want to bring this to the team.
Mhm.
And then we begin to start to have conversations about the fact that as when we coach leaders, the problems that leaders have and chiefs and department chairs have are very interdependent upon other factors, right? So it's other departments, disciplines, professions, other market forces, other quality metrics. And so these problems can't be solved in an individual basis. And so then we begin thinking about how we do systemic team coaching, which is to bring the entire group along so that everyone's voice is heard. We often, when we think about a team, we often think about resuscitation teams, right? When we think about everyone has their role, they have their responsibilities. I've spent the last 20 years teaching this in terms of what are our roles or responsibilities, how do we develop expertise, how do we become an expert. And I'll argue that when we think about as we coach the team and we coach the system of teams, it's really about not necessarily going only into one individual's particular role and responsibility, but it's instead that how as the collective could we be stronger and better together? And that really means then even appreciating those who we think are the naysayers, or everyone has a role in the perspectives they bring up and the different lens by which they see the same problem that the group, the team, or the organization is facing. And it's really about having the ability to, as the leader and as the group, to have a new, more powerful mindset when we're together. And that's not easy to develop. It really does take time. If you think about the time investment for coaching in general, just like any other skill acquisition, it takes time individually and collectively as a group. And organizations that really invest in that structural foundation then have less turnover, less errors, increased morale, increased ROI. I mean, that alone, if you had a stability, I mean, if a healthcare organization found stability anywhere, I think they're winning. Because I think everyone would agree, no matter what profession you are, nursing, physicians, RT, OT, if you're having staff unhappiness, those metrics at the end of the year where they're showing there's something not well about this group, stress because, life happens to all of us, right? We all have other kinds of stress. When we are able to handle that together more collectively and know that we don't need to be afraid anymore to advocate for our mental and physical and team well-being, then the rest will follow very easily. And it's only through that structural support of individual to team to system that we can achieve this.
And that's so important. So, have you found it a struggle to get the buy-in of systems because sometimes systems would say we don't have the money for that. And as you shared, you already shared a few reasons why it would behoove them to participate.
Right. And yes, most times they're looking for internal coaching and internal professional development to be that solution. And I think HR and internal coaches are wonderful. There are many of us who also serve as internal coaches, and those programs are wonderful, primarily as they provide a more cost-effective way for cultural sensitivity within that organization. I do think external coaches, after you've exhausted your internal programs, are important to look for innovation and further strengthening. So, for example, a lot of times people just think more education and more teaching and more learning and more just listening is going to help, but it's not, right? Coaching is an active process, and team and system coaching is also an active process. It does require the stakeholders, like up on high, all the way down through the chain, to be invested and involved. It really can't be something delegated. And so the question becomes, if you really want to strengthen from inside out, it's going to take that kind of muscle to be able to say, we believe in all of you so much that we're willing to invest an external consultant to come in and really begin to make this backbone internally stronger. It won't be able to get to every single person, right? Not every single person will get a benefit. Some people will use the internal, some people will use the external, but it's that combination of the two where the power becomes more powerful. The internal coaches, of course, you should use your internal metrics as much as possible. You already have a sunk cost in terms of investment in that particular service internally, and you should use them. But most internal and external coaches work pretty well collaboratively because we've all been trained with the same types of, different training programs, schools of thought, assessment programs, that they're complementary in terms of what we can provide.
Hmm. So, speaking to internal versus external coaching, what do you find with individual physicians or other healthcare workers? Because I feel like some would say, I'm not talking to anyone within my healthcare system, even though it's supposed to be confidential. It's not really confidential, or I don't wish to speak to them.
Yes, you hit the nail 100% on the head. You also have spoken to many physicians, and so you are very acutely aware of this particular phenomenon. And I would agree. I think most of us would not trust an internal coach, especially when you hit a certain high up level. And also, even if you're somebody who's really senior and very well respected in your organization, I think the hard thing is that that person could also serve as your mentor or could serve in other sponsorship. And so it becomes very awkward in terms of also thinking of them as a coach, and then the other roles and responsibilities might bleed in. Having the complete neutrality and having someone who's outside and who's also seeing how other systems operate makes you feel less alone and more able to see that there's a bigger picture beyond just my dysfunction. And if that dysfunction is or is not fixable, right, within the different ways that you look for solutions, sometimes, you know, the coach is going to be agnostic for your staying, right? And that's whether you're versus an internal coach, there is all a desire for vested support to
Hmm.
grow the organization, to make the organization stronger. But the external coach really is just vested in you as the individual.
Okay, but so in different systems, sometimes you work with individuals, sometimes you've worked with teams, and sometimes you've worked with systems.
But that's where we're headed, right?
Yeah,
Because the
yeah, okay.
reality is once the leader is healthy and whole, the question always becomes the questions that they bring to us is not about themselves. The
Hmm.
questions they bring are, how can I handle this situation? And so our leaders often get coached on, how do I deal with the issues I'm having with personnel inside our organization? And it's really not about them anymore. I think a lot of physicians often think about, coaching is about them. But the reality is, you serve many, many identities and many things. And sometimes it ends up being not what you think it is. Sometimes for some people, it's about repairing your relationship or your old ways of seeing things, before you are able to move on to new and tackle new challenges, new problems.
I can fully understand that. And because I've experienced coaching myself, a shout out to Dr. Michael Hirsch, my physician coach, who helped me process, accept a lot of things over the past few years. Would you like to share anything about your own personal coaching experience? What brought you to coaching and what how it helped you and encouraged you to move forward to get more learning in that area?
Yeah, so actually for me, the world shut down in 2020, and I always say that the pandemic saved my life because it's only by opening the COVID unit and really slowing down and thinking about, is this really how it's going to be? I mean, when we had no idea about the respiratory virus back then and we were recycling our N95 and everything slowed down, right? All my academic work, all of the teaching, everything else sort of got modified. And at the same time, I was going through a divorce, and also my mom got sick. And so all of these things happened all in that cluster of 2020. And I realized I needed help. I couldn't do this alone. This is completely uncharted territory. And so you have to hit, I think, a low enough point or perhaps a hard enough point that you realize that going there with someone on your side is going to be better than trying to go it alone. And so with my coach, Shannon McGorry, she is a Love, Strength, and Grace women's empowerment coach. And so she helped me through that process of that year. And in that process, I realized this is not totally dissimilar to some of the skills and supports and the constructs by which we as medical educators develop, teach, and grow people, whether it be in communication skills or in their career trajectories. And so I took a deeper dive, obviously, into studying studying going to back to school to become a coach, the accreditation process, the positive psychology, the research behind it, and really want to just emphasize for your audience, just it is important to actually have someone who's sat and thought through the science of change and the science of coaching, which is there. There's a huge amount of there's more than one international accrediting body, and there are many programs that have gone through the extra work necessary for the certification process. And that's the rest is history. I then found our healthcare professionals who have gone to the Institute for Professional Excellence in Coaching, IPEC, where I trained. And so we are all of the same mindset and also have all come from coaching. So all of our coaches at Transforming Healthcare Coaching either were or still currently working in healthcare as clinicians.
That's great. And when I hear these stories over and over again, I'm just like, oh my gosh. So, during the pandemic when things were so hard, and as you said, for some of you, things slowed down and some, clinics closed if as far as if it was like elective, surgeries or they all had to slow down. And doctors were really struggling but they looked, they're like, what can I do? And they just started looking online and how can I get help? How can I help myself? And so many during that time found coaching and that it's, helped themselves and it's helped their colleagues and everything. So I love the way that you all find ways to move forward.
Yes, absolutely. And I think that's the reality is all of us are resilient. It's just that coaching gets you there faster. If you don't use a coach, you'll get there eventually. Maybe with some other trial and error, but it's really nice to have a sort of we call it secret Sherpa, someone quiet on the side to be able to help you along the way.
It makes all the difference. And I know that some physicians don't like the word resilient because they'll try to say we're some of the most resilient people on the planet and we don't need to learn how to be more resilient. It's the system that's the problem. And what would you like to say to that?
I would say the both are true. And that really also is reflected on my website. I really believe in the both and. I am not about saying no. I am not about big boundaries because, ironically enough, I feel that many of us, what's happened is we are so much more than just one thing. And when we try to compartmentalize it or make things very yes, no, black, white, that's where the greater tension inside comes. It's like we're trying to negate some part of ourselves, even temporarily, is not great for the ego or the soul. And so I would say that it's both. When we're really strong and able to handle what comes and also can tap into places where we can self rejuvenate and also have a different mindset and see different things and be at our optimal performance of our energy level, and also the system can improve. And so there are
Mhm.
fortunately many people working on the system to improve. And actually, that's how you and I met on LinkedIn and also with the Dr. Lorna Breen Heroes Foundation as ambassadors.
Hmm. Yeah, that's great. And I fully understand again what you're saying. And I just think it's so important to understand that the yes, the system needs to change. It's the yes and. And there are things that individual physicians and healthcare workers can do in the meantime to shore themselves up. And sometimes once you receive coaching or take a pause and get the help and support you need or find joy outside of medicine, and then sometimes that promotes more joy inside medicine, or for some, it does mean, like pivoting or leaving, but just having the time to pause and having a coach, someone who's just invested in you.
Yes, absolutely. And I really love how you really highlight all the different ways to be able to find their both and.
Hmm. Yeah, that's great. Well, what has helped you move through challenging times or overcome challenges?
For me, I would say it's really just regrounding in breath in the yoga mat. For me, it's just coming back to that center. And then from there, and knowing that having greater faith that yes, it will all work out, right? If you think about all the things that we have been through, it cannot be, for me, any worse than what we've already been through in 2020 with all the different things I struggled. When I think about the velocity and the intensity for what we've been through, existential, societally, internationally, personally, that I know that when we reground back to that center, we'll be able to find that way forward.
Yeah, I think that's great. And also, it's interesting that you specifically say yoga because there's again the big, so I like to call it spade a spade. So just like the way doctors don't like the word resilience, they're like, yeah, we're not going to find our answers in pizza parties and yoga. But one doctor, the first time I spoke with her, she told me that yoga literally saved her life. And I know a young number of doctors that do yoga. So it's okay, yoga might not be your thing, but sometimes it actually is. Would you like to speak a little bit to why you specifically said that yoga helps you with your challenges?
Well, yoga is just moving mindfulness and moving meditation, right? And so we do know that there is enough evidence for gratitude and breath practice to be able to reground and increase the parasympathetic and vagal tonicity of our body. And so the reality is, if our entire world is one big threat, which it is normal for our emotions to be the warning sign, our sensory inputs to be the data, and the only way to be able to get that calmer, like laser-like precision, and I always give people the analogy, like, what happens to me when I'm in an emergency? I'm an emergency physician and a critical care physician. I get more calm because I have to become more calm to be able to deal with getting the data that I need to make the right decision. So I guess in some ways, whether you're someone who believes in stress inoculation or some other, way to desensitize yourself to extreme amounts of stress, like the military, like different emergency personnel, um, they all come down to that breath to center, and yoga really is just a moving version of it. So for many people, the body is actually goes hand in hand with breath. For some people, it's cognitive. For some people, it's feeling, and for some people, it's body. But body you can't really leave your breath, and you can't leave your body. And so
Mm-hmm.
when you come back to that grounding center, then the rest follows. And if you can just notice, I also will argue for a lot of surgeons, when they discover mindfulness-based stress reduction practices and the science behind it, they realize that's can be used so helpful in their scrub right before an operation
Mm-hmm.
because that really helps them become more precise with the noticing and the technique. And if anything, it allows your brain to function with greater clarity. And that's just from a purely biological sympathetic parasympathetic. And it's just neutral
Mm-hmm.
fact.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Oh, I love the way that you just spoke to gratitude and breath because through my own health challenges and everything and some support at our local cancer center, I learned more about like meditation and breathing. And I didn't realize I always used to clench my teeth. So now just learning. So now, and it's again, the first step is awareness. So right now, knowing if I'm clenching my teeth or if I'm ramping up inside and realizing that you can come back to that breath work. So whether whether you learn it through yoga, meditation, or something, it's something that you could always come back to. And also gratitude. One physician shared with me that he had received therapy, but it wasn't until his therapist put on her coaching hat, because she was also a coach, and he suggested that he start a gratitude practice. That really, it was either at the beginning of his day, but was he was before he went into the hospital, or at the end of the day, just like three things he was grateful for. And it could be little things like, oh, that he had a hot shower, or petting the fur of his dog, like little things like that. It doesn't have to be big, like existential type things.
Hmm. Right, absolutely. And it's funny you talk about awareness because that really is really foundational to sort of our framework. Our framework is actually and awareness, new action, and deliberate practice. And that really weaves in for all of us at transforming our teaching philosophy and also our ability to become more aware so that we can choose something different. Because it really is the first time you are aware of something is that first
Mhm.
reaction to data, right? Data as
Mhm.
you interact with whatever environment or whatever situation. And so as you become aware, if you can just slow down that time between stimulus and your response,
Mhm.
that's where you have the opportunity to choose. How do I feel like choosing today? What action do I want to take? My gut reaction might be because of my prior experiences, my prior trauma, my prior success potentially to
Mhm.
do something. But the reality is, people don't come to coaching because you want to just do the same thing again and again. I mean,
Mhm.
100% of our clients always say, I want to do something different. Yes,
Right.
no kidding. Or you want to do something that's completely you've never even seen before, right? A lot of people
Mhm.
come to coaching because they want to go into where no mentor can take them anymore. And so for that, you have to become aware enough to then see the possibilities of options ahead of you. Pick a new action and then deliberately practice it enough that you feel like you get good at it. And so whether that is a gratitude practice, whether that's a moving meditation practice, whether that's an experimentation cycle, whether you're trying to learn, like you and I, we've
Mhm.
learned to write, to podcast, to video podcasts. We've learned a lot of different things in our journey, and it's through that deliberate, intentional achievement that we now can actually add more things to our identity and more things to how we show up in the world.
Yeah, that is beautifully said. And one thing I would like to ask you is, of course, I talk to a lot of doctors, and a lot of doctors have gone on to receive coaching certification. And some of them are struggling a bit right now, in that they feel like there's a trust deficit actually in the whole country. And as far as, people like trusting to sign up for coaching, or really like anything, I think things just seem a little unsettled right now. Is there anything you could say that would offer encouragement or assurance to someone who is experiencing some trust issues and just not sure?
Yeah. So I think we all have trust issues, right? So I think just the ability to say yes, you are not alone or crazy in not wanting to trust anything. And at the same time, I think it's people like you, a connector, an amplifier, and someone who just is down to earth and really amplifies the lived experience of different people. Because and then, also that this is not super fancy and over polished and over
Mhm.
AI'd and like glossied up, right? That this is just you, the real Kim Downey. This is the real me. And
Mhm.
so just keeping it authentic, I do think that when we realize that's probably what is going to win out in the end, none of us will start to believe the bots anymore because it's not a real human behind it.
Mhm.
And the last thing any of us want to do is to be fooled by another robot. Or we get frustrated that, seriously, you didn't even care about me enough that you couldn't respond to my email like yourself, that your bot had to do it for you. And so I
Mhm.
think in this day and age, all of us still showing up, being willing to say our stories,
Mhm.
being brave enough to just be a human, that alone is going to be the winner. So I mean, I love AI. And at the same
Mhm.
time, there's a place and there's a really important place for things like what you're doing, Kim, which is really amplifying the stories, bringing them to light, keeping them real and authentic, because that alone is the superpower that's going to get us through hopefully this trust recession, as you've pointed out.
Well, thank you. I love that. Tell me a story and be authentic, and and we're good to go. So that's fantastic. Would you like to share anything that brings you joy?
Oh, bringing me joy. I don't know. I think probably just like sometimes just the simple things, right? Like just being able to hang out with friends, go out to see movies. My
Hmm.
hilarious, pathetic dog in the snow. She's a Shih Tzu, and so just the little things, right? So I think just being able to have a warm, safe place to live. I think as I get older, you start to realize, especially after the pandemic, like it's the little things that are like keep the day in, day out. Who cares if it's a little messy, but just being able to have friends, ability to travel, the finances to travel, and see people do things. That's really what I'm grateful for.
Well, I love that. And is there anything else that you would like to share as takeaways with our audience? And how can our listeners get in touch with you?
So I would just say that, you deserve more, no matter who, what, where you are in healthcare on the team. And I know while this audience primarily is majority physicians, the reality is we at Transforming believe in the entire interprofessional workforce in healthcare. And so if you're a physician leader or someone who has ability to influence, tell them about Transforming Healthcare Coaching because everyone, if they're elevated, then there is really a chance for all boats to rise with the tide. And so while this platform of really helping physicians as the team leaders in many healthcare organizations and just also as many individuals is really important and powerful, that we also hope to be a beacon for the entire interprofessional team. So just to let them know about our podcast, and you can find me at hello at transforminghealthcarecoaching.com. That's direct email to me. And then I'm mostly on LinkedIn. I'm still always there. Live sometimes, on video sometimes, writing, and it's not AI.
Well, that's terrific. Well, thanks again for being my guest, Lily. I really appreciate you taking the time.
Thank you so much for having me, Kim. And I look forward to watching you grow and this platform expand because it's already blossomed in so many different ways. And so I'm really grateful for this opportunity to be part of the many stories that you've curated.
Well, and thank you because there would be no podcast without you and all of you. So I'm equally grateful for you. And in closing, to move the needle in healthcare, we all need to raise our voices and we all need to care about each other. We already know that doctors need to care about patients, patients need to care about doctors too. So stand up, doctors, and let's stand up for doctors.